Lakota chief's children were starving. A scarred widow fed them and gained a tribe of her own. The rabbit was too small. I held it by the hind legs and looked at it and knew, too small, 3 pounds maybe less, and I had 11 mouths to feed before the sun moved another hand width across the sky. My youngest Chayton was 7 winters. He had not complained once in 4 days. That was the part that sat on me hardest, not the crying, because children cry and you can answer that. It was the quiet. The way a child goes quiet when he has learned that crying changes nothing. I set the rabbit down on the flat rock beside the fire pit and turned away from it. The woman's wagon had been sitting on the far side of the tree line since the previous evening. I had watched the smoke from her cook fire thread up through the cottonwoods. I had sent Lakota, my oldest son, 17 winters, to watch but not approach. He came back and said, "One woman alone, a gray horse, a wagon with iron rims, a dog brown and old. She cooked something that smelled of fat and onion, and he had stood in the trees long enough that I sent for him twice before he came." I did not go to her. I was running wolf, and I had been chief of this band for 9 years, since my father died of the coughing sickness the soldiers brought. I did not go to white women at the edge of my camp to beg for food. Not then. Not while I still had pride left to protect. By noon the rabbit was cooked and divided and gone in less than the time it takes to say grace, if we had been people who said grace. The children ate without speaking. Even my sister Winona's 2 boys, who were usually loud about everything, ate with their eyes on their bowls. I walked to the edge of the tree line. The woman's wagon was still there. She was not at the fire, but the smoke was still rising, which meant she had banked it, which meant she was not leaving yet. Her gray horse was picketed on a long rope, moving in slow circles, eating the last of the autumn grass. The dog lifted its head when I stepped clear of the trees, but did not bark. Then I saw the bundle. It was sitting on a flat rock 20 feet from the tree line on her side, wrapped in a piece of brown canvas and tied with a cord. No note. There was no note because a note would have meant she expected something back, and she hadn't left it close enough to be considered an offering, just close enough that I could see it from where I stood. I looked at it for a long time. Then I walked back to camp. I told Lakota to go get it. He looked at me. He was 17 and had opinions about things the way young men do. I said it again, quiet, and he went. It was dried venison, a cloth sack of dried corn, and 3 onions. Enough. Not plenty, but enough. I did not send thanks. I told myself it was because a chief does not explain his actions, but I knew better than that. I did not send thanks because receiving it had cost me something I didn't have a name for yet, and I was not ready to admit that the cost had been paid. Her name, I learned later, was Clara Marsh. She had been moving west from Missouri for 6 weeks alone, since her husband died at a river crossing in Nebraska. Axle broke on the descent, wagon rolled, and Jonah's Marsh went into the water and didn't come out. She pulled the horse free herself. She had a scar on the left side of her face, a long one that ran from just below her ear to the corner of her jaw, from a fire years before her husband found her. People had stared at it her whole life, which is probably why she had learned to look straight back at them without blinking. I know all this because she told me. But that came later. The second morning she left a clay pot near the same rock. It was still warm, some kind of stew, thick, with actual meat in it. I stood at the tree line and looked at it and felt the thing again, that unnamed cost, and then I thought about Chayton's silence, and I walked over and picked it up. She was watching from the opening of her wagon. She didn't wave, didn't call out, just watched, and I looked at her directly and carried the pot back into the trees. The third morning I went to the rock myself before she put anything there. I stood and waited. She came out of the wagon carrying a covered basket. She saw me and stopped. We were maybe 40 feet apart. She was a medium-sized woman, straight-backed, with gray in her brown hair that she wore pinned up but not neatly. The scar caught the morning light. She didn't look away from me, and I didn't look away from her. After a moment she walked forward and set the basket down on the rock, cornbread and a piece of smoked ham. She straightened and looked at me. I said in English, which I had learned from the trader Helms over 4 winters, "Your husband is gone." It was not a question. It was an acknowledgement. I was saying I knew she was alone and that I had noticed and that this was something. I was not sure what I was saying beyond that, but it seemed important to say it. She said, "Yes, 6 weeks ago." "Where are you going?" She was quiet a moment. "I was going to my sister in Oregon. I'm not sure now." I picked up the basket. "This is enough for 2 days," I said. "After 2 days, do not leave food at the rock. Come to the camp." She looked at me steadily. "All right." I walked back into the trees. I want to be honest about what I was doing. I knew my band's situation clearly. We had 11 people, 4 of them children, and the autumn hunt had been poor because the soldiers' patrols had pushed the elk herds 30 miles east. We had dried stores from summer, but not enough. Winter was 6 weeks away, maybe less if the clouds I'd been watching over the northern ridgeline meant what I thought they meant. I had no trade goods. The agency was 2 days' ride, and the agent, Collie, was a man who shook your hand while counting what you had left in your pockets. I had pride. I had always had pride. My father used to say pride was the warm coat that didn't weigh anything fine to have, but you can't eat it. I was not taking in this woman out of charity, and I was not doing it out of weakness. She had supplies I needed. She had a horse and a wagon, and she could shoot. I had watched Lakota watch her, and he told me she had a rifle, kept clean, and she had stood beside her wagon one evening and shot a hawk off a fence post at a distance that made him look at me differently when he said it. She was alone, and winter was coming, and she had no people. The trade was plain. What I did not expect was what came after. What I did not account for was the woman herself. Clara Marsh came to the camp on the morning of the 2nd day, as I had said. She did not come empty-handed. She brought her whole wagon, the gray horse, the brown dog, a canvas sack of dried beans, a Dutch oven that she had to have paid real money for, and the rifle, which she wore on her back as natural as breathing. Winona came out of her tipi and looked at this woman and then looked at me. Winona was 42 winters and had seen everything and trusted almost none of it, and she looked at me with a specific expression that meant, "You have done a thing, and now we will all live in the consequences of it." I did not explain myself to Winona. I showed Clara where to set her wagon on the south side of the camp, near the horses, where the wind came softest, and I told her the rules of the camp in simple English. No wandering past the northern tree line without telling someone. The horses are not for riding without asking. The fire in the center is for all. She nodded. She had listened carefully, not with the look of someone humoring a person they think is beneath them, which was a thing I was accustomed to seeing in white faces, but with the flat attention of someone who had learned that understanding the rules of a new place was how you stayed alive. Then she walked to the central fire, moved the cooking pot to a better angle without being asked, and started cutting onions. Winona watched this and said something in Lakota that I won't repeat here. I almost smiled. The first real trouble came from inside the camp. My brother-in-law, Lame Bear, who was Winona's husband and who had never in his life found anything easy to accept, came to me on the 3rd evening and stood where I was repairing a bridle and made his position clear. He was not quiet about it. The woman was a problem. Having a white woman in the camp was inviting soldiers. Her presence was an insult to the people who had died at soldiers' hands. He said several other things I will not set down here, things that had more to do with Clara's face than with soldiers, though he used the soldiers as his reason. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "The children ate today. Yesterday they ate. The day before they ate. When you can feed 11 people through a hard winter without this woman's supplies, and without her Dutch oven, and without the 2 deer she and Lakota will bring in tomorrow, because she is a better tracker than anyone in this camp, including me. Then come back and talk to me about insults." Lame Bear went away. Winona had been listening from the doorway of their tipi. She looked at me for a moment and then went back inside. That was Winona's version of approval. She and Lakota left before dawn the second morning she was with us. I watched them go. Lakota had 4 inches on her and 30 pounds, and they walked side by side into the tree line without speaking. She had learned already that Lakota did not speak much in the morning, and I stood at the edge of camp and felt something I could not name, a thing close to ease. I had not felt that in a long time. They came back by mid-afternoon with a mule deer and a white-tailed doe, between 2 people. Lakota was carrying the doe, and Clara was dragging the deer on a makeshift travois she had rigged from 2 branches and her own belt strap. I looked at the deer and then at her. She was dirty and her hair had come down on one side, and she had blood on her right sleeve to the elbow. She met my eyes briefly and then looked away, the first time I had seen her look away, and said something about the deer being smaller than she'd hoped, which I thought was possibly the most unnecessary thing I'd heard in years. I said, "It's enough." She nodded and handed the travois rope to Lakota and went to wash her hands at the water barrel. Winona took the deer without ceremony and began to work. That night the camp ate. I mean ate, not the careful rationing of the previous weeks. The children ate until they were round-faced and drowsy, and even Lame Bear ate 2 bowls without saying anything unpleasant, which for Lame Bear was the same as a speech of gratitude. I sat at the fire after the others had gone to sleep, and Clara came and sat across from me. The fire was low. She had Chayton's old blanket over her shoulders. My youngest had put it there himself, which told me something. She said, "The snow is coming sooner than you think." I said, "I know. I have canvas. We could reinforce the windward side of the camp. I've done it before in Nebraska." I looked at the fire. "You have done a lot of things before." "I've had to," she said. There was quiet between us. It was not uncomfortable, which surprised me. I had found quiet with white people to be a thing they rushed to fill, as though silence was a problem they had to solve. Clara sat in it the way a person sits in something that fits. I said, "Your sister in Oregon." She said, "What about her?" "You are not going." It was not a question. She looked at the fire for a moment. "No," she said. "Not this winter anyway." "After winter." Another pause. She pulled the blanket tighter. "I don't know, maybe." I did not ask again. Some things need room to work themselves out. There is a particular quality to the cold that comes at the end of October in that part of the plains. It is not the hard cold of January, which is a cold you can set yourself against and know. This cold is deceptive. It comes in wet, with a wind that finds every gap in every wall, and it carries a smell like iron, and it arrives before you have finished preparing for it. It arrived on a Monday. I know because Clara had started marking days on a scrap of paper, which she kept in her coat pocket, and she told me it was Monday when I came to look at the northern sky and said a word in Lakota that Lakota later asked me to translate. We spent 3 days on the camp. Clara's canvas reinforced the windward side. Lakota and I cut timber and stacked it. Winona organized the food stores and packed the dried meat in the clay jars she kept for it. Clara worked alongside Winona the entire time, and I watched those 2 women without either of them seeing me watch, and I tried to understand what was happening between them. Winona had not spoken to Clara directly, not once. She issued instructions through Lakota or through gestures, which Clara followed without complaint. On the second day, I saw Winona hand Clara a piece of smoked fat while they were working on the food stores without looking at her, just pressed it into her hand, and Clara took it and nodded, and neither of them said anything, and that was Winona speaking a language she reserved for people she had decided to keep. The blizzard hit on a Thursday. It came in hard from the northwest, and for 2 days we could not see the tree line from the camp. The children stayed in the tippies. The horses were brought under cover. Clara's gray horse, who she called Hector for reasons I never quite understood, stood in the small shelter we had built and was perfectly calm all through it, which raised him in my estimation considerably. On the second night of the blizzard, when the wind was at its worst, Clara's wagon lost its cover. Just took it. 1 minute it was there and the next the wind had it and it was gone into the dark. She didn't cry about it. She came and told me, her voice even, and we went out together in the wind and secured what we could of the frame with rope and spent 40 minutes in weather that would have stopped most men I have known. And when we came back in, she was soaked through and shaking, and she sat by the central fire and did not say a word about it. I brought her dry things, a blanket, one of my shirts which was too large, and I set them beside her. She looked up at me. The firelight was low and orange, and the scar on her face was very clear, and I looked at it directly, the way I always did, because I had noticed that she noticed when people didn't look at it directly, and that the not looking was worse for her than the looking. She said, "Thank you." I said, "It's nothing." She said, "It's not nothing, Running Wolf." She said my name the way a person says a word they have been turning over in their mouth for a while, carefully, like they mean it to land where it lands. I sat down beside the fire. We sat there a long time. Collie, the agency agent, came in the first week of November. He came with 2 soldiers and a man from the land office whose name I never learned, and they rode into the camp without announcing themselves, and Collie got down from his horse and looked around the camp with the specific expression of a man making calculations, which he was always doing. Then he saw Clara. He said her name before he said mine. He said, "Mrs. Marsh," in a tone that held several things at once, surprise, disapproval, and a kind of satisfaction, as though finding her here confirmed something he had suspected. Clara came out of the tipi she had been sharing with Winona and the children since the blizzard took her canvas. She was wearing her own coat, and her rifle was on her back, and she looked at Collie and his soldiers and the landman, and did not change her expression. Collie said to me, "This woman living here?" I said, "She is." He said several things after that. Some of them were about regulations. Some of them were about the arrangement being improper. Some of them were spoken to Clara rather than to me, in a tone that assumed she would agree with him, which was his first serious mistake. Clara said, "Mr. Collie, these people fed me when I was alone and had nowhere to go. I fed them when they were short of food. That is a trade between neighbors, and it is none of your business." Collie started to say something else. I said, "She is of this camp. She is under my protection. That is what you will write in your report." He looked at me. He looked at the camp, at Lakota standing behind me, at Lame Bear to my left, at Winona in the tipi doorway with Chayton at her knee. He looked at Clara standing with her rifle on her back and her jaw set and her eyes on him, not flinching. He wrote in his report. I know because I later had Helms the trader read it to me. It said that the widow Clara Marsh was residing with the Running Wolf band of her own free will, and that the camp was orderly and well provisioned, and that he saw no cause for intervention. Collie was a complicated man. He was not always wrong. After the soldiers left, Lame Bear came to me. He said, "You spoke well." I waited. He said, "The woman, she stood there. She did not move." I said, "No, she didn't." He was quiet a moment. Then he said something in Lakota that I will not translate directly, but which meant, roughly, "She is one of the people now, whether you say so or not. The children call for her. Winona cooks with her. The horses know her. She has been here long enough." He walked away. That night Winona came to where I was sitting at the edge of camp, looking at the stars the way my father used to look at them, which was with no specific thoughts, just looking, just being inside the night. Winona sat beside me. She said in Lakota, She is not going to Oregon. I said, I know. She said, you know because you have asked her not to go. I said, I have not asked her anything. Winona made a sound that was approximately the sound a person makes when a man says something they have witnessed him not doing. Then she said, you should ask. I did not answer her. She sat with me a while longer and then went to bed. I asked, not with words first. I want to be honest about this. I asked by being the one who checked her horse in the morning before she was awake. I asked by sitting near where she was working when I had no reason to be nearby. I asked by learning that she liked her coffee strong, and made it that way without being told, and handed it to her, and watched her look down at it, and then up at me with a particular look in her eyes that a man of 60-some years has no business pretending he can't read. I asked in December, 2 months after she had come to the camp. We were outside after the others were asleep, the way we had started doing in the evenings, not always talking, just sitting near the fire with the cold all around us and the stars hard and clear overhead. I had been carrying a thought for 3 weeks, and it had gotten heavy enough that I was tired of carrying it. I said, I don't want you to go to Oregon. She looked at me. In the spring, I said, or at all. I don't want you to go. She was quiet a long time, long enough that I felt the thing I felt when I was 17 and asked a girl something important. That particular suspended waiting, like standing at the top of a drop and not yet having fallen. She said, why? I could have given her several reasons, practical ones about the winter and the children and the hunting, but she would have known what those were and what they weren't, and Clara Marsh was not a woman you gave lesser answers to. I said, because this is where you are, and this is where I am. She looked at the fire. I watched her face, the scar, the set of her jaw, the way her breath made small clouds in the cold air. Then she turned and looked at me with everything in her face, not guarded the way she usually held herself. Open, fully open, the way a person looks when they have stopped arguing with a thing they already knew. She said, all right. One word, too, the simplest thing. I reached out and she put her hand in mine, and it was cold and small, and I held it, and the fire crackled, and somewhere in the camp a horse shifted and blew, and the night was very still. In the spring we moved camp, as we did every year, following the better grass and the water. Clara moved with us. Her gray horse, Hector, walked at the back of the column alongside my own horse, and her brown dog walked beside the horse, and she rode with Chayton in front of her because he had asked to and she had said yes, and I rode at the head of the column and knew without looking back that she was there. Collie came again in April. He had a different look this time. He sat on his horse at the edge of the new camp and looked at everything and at me and at Clara, who was standing near the central fire with Winona, the two of them looking back at him. He said to me, this is a permanent arrangement, I take it. I said yes. He nodded slow. He wrote something in his ledger. He looked at Clara once more and tipped his hat to her, which she did not acknowledge, and then he rode away with his soldiers. Lakota came up beside me and watched them go. He said in Lakota, he is afraid of her. I said yes. He said, that is good. He walked away, grinning, which was unusual for Lakota in the morning. I am old now. I won't pretend otherwise. My hair is white and my left knee tells me the weather better than the clouds do, and there are mornings when I lie still for a while before rising, listening to the sounds of the camp coming awake, taking stock of what still works the way it used to and what doesn't. Those mornings Clara is usually already up. I hear her at the fire. I hear Hector moving on his rope because Hector is very old now and moves slowly, and his sounds are slower too. I hear the dog, a new dog now, brown like the old one, same color as if she had ordered it that way. I lie still for a moment and take stock of the things that matter. Chayton is 22 winters. He is tall and quick and laughs easily, and there are times when I see him look at Clara the way A man looks at a mother, not confused about what she is but clear on it, and it settles something in me that I did not know needed settling. Lakota is 30 and has his own family, and is going to be a better chief than I was, which is the best thing I can say about a son. Winona still has opinions about everything, and is still right about most of them. Clara's scar is as it always was. She wears her hair down now most days. She has learned Lakota, or enough of it, the functional words and the important ones, and she uses them without ceremony. She sits in the women's circles and they sit with her, and that happened without my doing anything about it, which is the way things happen when they are real. Some mornings I come out of the tipi and she is at the fire and she looks up at me and there is the look, the one I saw that first December, the one with nothing held back, and it is the same look. It has not changed or faded. If anything, it is clearer, the way things get clearer when the complicating parts fall away. I did not know, when that rabbit was too small and the children were quiet, that there was a woman at the edge of my trees who would change the thing my life was. I was not looking for that. I was looking at a rabbit and counting mouths and trying to keep my pride intact while watching it erode. She put food on a rock without asking for anything back. I sent my son to get it. That was how it began, with need, and with a woman who understood that dignity and need can sit beside each other without one canceling the other. She never treated my need as weakness. She never treated my acceptance as debt. She just kept showing up, the way a good person shows up, steady and plain and without drama, and somewhere in the showing up she became the center of something I had forgotten I was allowed to have. The camp is quiet in the early mornings. The fire is low. She hands me the coffee strong. I take it. She sits beside me. That is all. That is everything.